Okay, so here we are taking a look at the pelvic half. Now, the pelvic half is a complex shape, and it's as many two-dimensional drawings as you look at. It still can be quite difficult to get a feel for how this bone is shaped. So when you get your chance to find a skeleton somewhere, or if you want to spend $20 or however much it is on Amazon, you can buy a model of a pelvic half. And if you're getting really into embodying it, I suggest you do that. But here we go, beginning our exploration. So we've touched a lot of these parts in the other videos. What I want you to see in this image is that the pelvis is sort of two bowls. They often call it the upper or lower pelvis, and it's separated by this line in the center. Now, this line is the thickest line. This is the pectineal line, I believe it's called. And that is the thickest part of the pelvic half, and it leads directly into the SI joint. It's definitely integral in transferring the weight and the force through the pelvis. So that's something that you can't touch, but you definitely want to work on embodying. Now that line is also going to separate the upper ilium from the lower ischium, as well as the front pubis. So those are the three bones that fuse. I think they fully fuse by the time it's after we're born. I don't remember the age, but it's useful to see that. So we have the ilium up top here, and then the pubis in front and the ischium in bottom, and they all fuse to form the pelvic half. And notice that they all connect in this Y-shaped connection piece in the center of the hip socket, which is very interesting. So this is looking from the outside in. Of course, this is the hip socket, and that's on the outside. And then we have the ischium, or the sit bones, sort of moving a little bit in. Now you can see that because of the shading, but it's really hard to see in this image. You might also imagine, okay, where's the SI joint going to be? It's going to be probably around about here. And you can imagine, okay, here's the pubic bone. So this right here is that thick pectineal line that we can't see in the image, but useful to think about where it is, because we can touch a lot of these parts of the bone, not all of them, but a lot of them, but we can't touch that inside. This is a fun image. Get these rotating images that'll give you a sense of the three-dimensionality. So to me, this image helps remind me that the pelvic halves could be considered extensions or pieces of the leg, much like we would consider the shoulder blade to be part of the arm. You can consider the pelvic half to be part of the leg. And in that sense, we don't really have a pelvis. We just have legs that connect to a spine, and the sacrum is definitely part of the spine. Let's see what else we've got here. Here's a real bone. So as you look at these real bones, definitely very different. To me, this looks like it's probably a female pelvis. You can tell because the shapes of the pelvic halves tend to be broader and shorter in a female pelvis. And in a male pelvis, they'll be narrower and taller, which affects how we can create power and things, and also allows for women to give birth. But that's a good way to imagine the pelvic half resting on the leg. You know, this would be a standing position you're looking out of the left leg, basically. So the more you can imagine the way that the socket of the pelvic half, that hip socket, rests and fits onto the ball of the femur, the more that's going to help you be more efficient in your movement. So here's a side version. This one's kind of cool because it's got the sacrum in there too. And now here's definitely well, not definitely, I suppose, but definitely more towards a masculine shaped pelvis. You see much more verticality than compared to this one, which looks more like a female pelvis. Right, so it's much wider and not quite as tall. Go back. You see the sacrum extends much longer too. In the pelvic half, it really looks more stretched as compared to this other one. So some of what I talk about in one of the videos, but is very hard to see in this, is the way that the pelvic half twists. So Eric Franklin talks a lot about the pelvic half as being sort of the shape of a propeller. I'm actually holding mine right now, my model right now. And, it's got this inward sort of curve. So when we look at the femur, we'll look at how it has an inward curve, and all the bones curve in some way because we're all basically just moving spirals. But the pelvic half has a very distinct and prominent spiral in. You can watch some of the videos to get a feel for how that is, but you might be able to sort of imagine. I don't think it's very easy to see in these images, but maybe this last image will help, and that's the rotating pelvic half. So as you look at that, you can see one, because of the shading, you can really see the pectineal line, that thick line running from the pubis as it comes around up to the SI joint. And then you can also see the way it spirals. So we're looking at a right pelvic half, and as it comes around to this angle right here, I'll let it come around again. You can really see, if you imagine sliding your hand down the opposite side of the top, down to the sit bone. So starting at the iliac crest, sliding down to the sit bone. And what you do is you imagine it, once it flips around 180 right here, you see that your hand would be rotating to the left. So if I were sliding my hand down right there, down to the sit bone, my hand would be rotating to the left. Once again, sliding down the inside of the pelvis. These are things you can't actually touch in your body. So you really have to sort of imagine it and feel it. This is where holding the bones really helps. So as you're looking at the spin, you can start to imagine the mirror image connecting at the pubic bone. And then there'd be space in the back. And you see them both spinning now. And then add in the sacrum. You say, oh yes, now I have those three bones that are forming the pelvic bowl. So now looking at this pelvic half again, you can locate the pubic bone out in front. That one's pretty easy. Might be a little bit harder to recognize, okay, well, where exactly is the SI joint? Which is the front half? Can you tell which is the front half? That will help by locating the pubic bone and the sit bone. So the sit bone's on bottom, and the pubic bone's going to swing around the back, and now it's on the left side, and now it's in the front, which means the front hip joint, the front hip point, the ASIS, is now in front, and it's swinging around to the right and now in back. And then the PSIS is now in back, swinging to the left and to the front. And just near the PSIS is going to be the SI joint, which you can tell is there by the shading and also by the fact that the line from the pubis travels directly to it. Look at one more point that we won't really talk about until we get into ligaments and things, but it's this little protrusion down bottom. So you have the sit bone on bottom, and then the little protrusion sticking out. You might try reaching or touching for that. It's can be quite hard to find because it's covered by all sorts of things, but it's an interesting point to sort of imagine embodying. And what if you imagine the movement initiating from that point? So there you go. That's the pelvic half, and good luck feeling into that. If you enjoyed this video, Sign up for the InBody Space newsletter and share the link with a friend. You can also find original content on Facebook and Instagram.